will be setbacks and there will be days where you do it wrong and you're not feeling good. And I just want to say, don't worry about that. Tomorrow is day one. You can start over. No matter how many times you think you've quote unquote failed, it's not a failure. You're learning, because when you get back up, you have knowledge you didn't have the last time you got knocked down.
And then you're not going to do it again. It's only a failure if you keep
Hopefully
doing the
not.
same thing over and over and over and can learn nothing.
Right? And
Then
don't
we can
learn
talk
anything.
Yeah,
Right.
then we can talk about failure. Today's story on the Business Library, ebbs and flows, ups and downs, a lot like life always does. Sometimes it just decides to be life, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it besides making the best out of the moment. And that's what we're going to be focused on today, to actually overcome those things so you can become a better version of yourself, which is why I have Darla on here today. And just to start us off, can you elaborate a little bit on your journey, experience with abuse, and then also turning that into becoming a trauma coach and a self-love coach?
I grew up in a home that was quite abusive. My dad, I suspect, was bipolar. So first of all, I'm always walking on eggshells. I have no idea what version of dad is coming home today when he gets home from work. And I had a mom who neglected me and she did not protect me from him. So that led into me having a false narrative about myself. And so when I didn't have that healthy dynamic with my dad, I tried to fill that void with men. First of all, I was comfortable with discomfort. I was comfortable with dysfunction. So I sought out men who were emotionally unavailable. Unknowingly, I was playing out that same dynamic that I had in childhood, in my personal life, in my marriages, in my relationships. And that led me in 2004, to get involved with a narcissist. I had no idea what they looked like. I actually thought they were the sleazy car salesman. They were very, very obvious. I had no idea there was a thing called covert narcissism, which is they come in a pretty package. They're very charming. They're very attentive. They love bomb. They are the white knight on the white horse you've always waited for, except that's all just an act. And I didn't know that. And after 10 years of being in this abusive relationship, which I didn't know was abusive until a year after I left, I became someone I didn't know. I let all my boundaries down. I gained a lot of weight. He controlled everything that I did, including what I wore, how my hair was, what colors I wore, what I was allowed to say, what I wasn't allowed to say. So how that led into coaching is, as I went through my healing journey, I realized that I had a lot to offer other victims of narcissistic abuse. It is a form of brainwashing. I understand why we stay. I was a successful executive assistant. I had a successful career. I was financially independent and had a great credit score. But that's why he went after me, because of that. And so I understood that it's not just people with low self-esteem that get involved in these abusive relationships. Anyone can, if you are able to be fooled. And so I wanted to help other women because I understand why they get involved and why they stay.
Well, I think it's a beautiful mission you're on.
Thank you.
And sometimes we have to go through the terrible things to actually help people because, well, if I was in your position and I sat and was trying to coach myself, but like, who the hell is this guy thinking he is? He knows absolutely nothing, because I don't. So that would be a very fair sentence to say. But fast forwarding in time a little bit, because in our last conversation, you called 2024 your year of joy. And why is that?
I turned 55 and I realized that my life was not where I wanted it to be. I'd been divorced 3 times. I was working for other people when, if I had gone with plan A, my house would have been paid off and I would have been thinking about retirement. And I decided that, as I enter the later chapter of my life, I want to live it the way I want to live it. So I declared it my year of joy and said, anything that isn't joyful to me, I'm going to remove from my life. And that included my job. A year ago, I decided to quit my job and start my own business because I'm very rebellious. I like to do my own thing. I don't like to be told what to do. And I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, and what happened is that this year became the year of yes to me, because I got rid of all the things I didn't want in my life. And then this year is moving towards the things I do.
So what was plan A actually? Now you made me curious.
Yeah. So plan A was I got married at 19 and had a baby at 22, bought a house at 23. So, it was the white picket fence, the whole, like, I had the corner lot in a DC suburb, literally. And, plan A was the safe route. And, my first husband was not abusive by any means. Emotionally unavailable, yes. But he did everything by the safe route. And I realized after being married and with him for 18 years that wasn't my style, that I got married too young, just like my mom said I did. And
you were right.
Right? When you get engaged at 17 and you think you know everything, you know nothing. But, I had to learn that the hard way, right? But plan A was to be married to one man for my entire life, to, live the dream and continue to go up in the corporate ladder like I was, and to pay off the house and, retire at 55. And that's not what happened.
There were a few spanners in the works, it sounds like,
A
along
little bit,
the way.
Yeah.
So what was that moment of realization like, when you realized, well, this is not quite it? You've been at it for 18 years. That's quite a long time. You've only been without him for 17. That's actually longer.
There was a sad moment, to be honest. I mean, he's the father of my daughter. So, part of the reason I stayed so long was part of that. I didn't want to break up that family. And how it happened wasn't great either, because I got involved with my next husband, who was the narcissist, while I was still married to my first husband. So, I have to say probably the hardest part of that was the day I had to tell my daughter that I was leaving her dad, and to watch her reaction and devastation. That was the worst part.
I can try and imagine. I won't say I can imagine. That's one of those things I would feel uncomfortable with myself hearing as well. But yeah, it's different when there is other people getting impacted compared to, well, just the two people in the relationship. There is a reason why they want to break up. It's not working in the right direction, and that is what it is. But hurting other people, and then bringing them into it because they didn't really choose it. It's kind of just forced on them, for lack of better words. But in the way of how these experiences have made you better, how would you say it has made you a stronger person, and also, in that same question, made you a better coach?
Yes. At that time in my life, I was a codependent. So part of the reason that I got involved with another man while I was still in a relationship with another is because not only it was more than me being manipulated by a narcissist to do something morally wrong that isn't in my character. It was because I was incapable of being by myself. So from the time I was 16 to 45, I was either in a relationship, getting out, or starting one. I was never alone. So that was the first step, is learning to be comfortable in my own skin. It's okay to be single. It's okay to be by myself. Being lonely and acting lonely are two very different things. And acting lonely is where you make bad decisions.
Yeah, I never really, in that sense, tried to be alone, because I've always lived close to my family, that stuff. But I guess I'm blessed in a way. A lot of the times, I would rather not have people in the same room with me. This online thing works just perfectly fine. Worst goes to worst, hit end call, we're gone. I'm never going to hear from you again. And then it's not a problem. But it's not a person. Well, you can just leave. Actually, I have done that a few times. People's reactions has been like, what? Because if you don't stop whatever you're doing, X, I'm going to leave. They say one more time, I'm a man of my word. I'm out. Even if I don't want to, because I said it, I feel responsibility to do it. So I have to leave.
Yes. Well, that's a good thing, actually, though. That means you have standards and boundaries.
Yeah, don't get too much on my bad side. One of my good friends in the past, he had to actually tell people when they start to get on my nerves, like, maybe you should chill out a little bit, because he will just fuck up. You just go. He doesn't really care that much about that kind of. He goes out the door. He doesn't say anything, and he's not gonna come back. Not tonight. That ain't happening.
Yeah.
But it's. I guess in that way, I've been lucky that a lot of other things have influenced me at an early age, and also it took time, like being alone, because like in school, like you're always alone. Like you're hanging out with your friends 5 days a week at minimum. If you have like a good environment in school, of course. But I had some pretty good friends in school, but getting into like work, that kind of stuff, definitely was a transition, and you kind of realize all of these people you thought were going to be your best friends forever, they're really not. Which it's a bit of a lesson for all of us, I believe.
Yes.
But how do you like help your clients with your experience? Like, how would you say that makes you a better coach than somebody that hasn't suffered all of this trauma?
So how I actually started coaching is I was seeing a therapist a couple of years ago, and I was actually, at the time, I was actually getting out of a relationship with a third narcissist. I actually ended up getting back together with him after I ended the coaching, and 6 months later realized, holy crap, I've done it again. So, but during that coaching experience, that therapy experience, so I'm not saying that this lady wasn't a good therapist and what she knew, but she wasn't a good therapist for narcissistic abuse recovery because she hadn't lived it and didn't understand it. And so there was some victim blaming going on. She was demanding. She was not giving me a safe space to heal in the way I needed to heal. And so I was becoming re-traumatized, and it wasn't the first time I'd come across this. And I really felt abandoned by the mental health community. And I, at that point, realized I can't be the only person that feels like this. There's got to be others out there like me. So I started to get a certification in somatic trauma-informed coaching, which deals with body sensations and how we store and release trauma. And I thought, while there is the imposter syndrome in the beginning, because I will always be healing, I've come to realize that if I'm looking for the woman that was me 10 years ago, I have so much to offer her. And I have the understanding of the lived experience. I understand why she stayed for 10, 20 years. I understand why 12 years out, she's still healing and hears his voice in her head, because I do. So I just really felt compelled, and that kind of morphed. I do still specialize in trauma and narcissistic abuse recovery, but through my own journey, particularly in the past couple of years, I've realized that I was the common denominator in all of my dysfunctional relationships. And why was that? It was because I didn't know who I was and I didn't love myself. And after reading a book that we need to put aside the Pollyanna, look in the mirror, tell yourself you love yourself, and just believe the words, it doesn't work like that. You have to get to know who you are. So I became a self-love coach because I realized that we can't have happy or healthy relationships with other people unless we have one with us.
So true. So true. Like, end of the day, you gotta love yourself. Otherwise, you're always gonna seek something, almost in being desperate. And once you're desperate,
yes,
you don't make good decisions. Very bad decisions.
Yes.
Too emotional decisions don't go together if it's too emotionally high or low. It makes for very, very bad decisions. And also, since we're already talking about what you do and how you really go in and help people, how do you actually go in and facilitate like healing and self-awareness in your mastermind group specifically?
So I work with women only, and we focus a lot on body sensation. So I referred to somatics before. I am trained to be more aware not only of my own body sensations, but to help people to be aware of theirs as well. So for instance, if I'm working with someone in a mastermind, she may express, I'm so angry, I don't feel heard. I said to my husband, or I said to my boyfriend that I need him to do this, and it didn't happen. Then I'm be like, okay, what body sensation comes with that emotion? Often she may say something like, my chest feels tight, my throat feels tight. When we don't feel heard, our throat often will feel tickly or tight. And then I'm going to say, when in the past have you had that body sensation? It often connects to a childhood experience or a past relationship, sometimes too. There's an underlying trigger that's going on. Not that the behavior of that person isn't necessarily bad, but often we are getting triggered because of something that happened to us before, but we're reacting to it in the present. So I'm helping her to get in touch with that. I'm going to give her space. Sometimes this gets really darn uncomfortable. I know with my own processing, and it feels like you're going to die. But what I've realized, if we sit with that emotion for a few minutes, it will actually dissipate. And it'll kind of like when you have surgery and that initial pain of the surgery is like almost unbearable, but you give it some time and then the pain starts to dissipate as you heal. This is the same kind of process. It's kind of like you shake up a Coke bottle, but you keep the cap on. It's still ready to explode. But if we let those emotions come to the surface and we honor them and feel them instead of stuffing them, they actually can start to decrease.
That Coke bottle analogy was actually really good, because if you let
Thank you.
it boil over too much, it's just going to be
Yeah.
almost quite a violent explosion. And
that's when we lash out at the grocery clerk, right?
Yeah,
and they've done nothing.
Everybody, no matter who's, if they're in your way, they're going to get it. It doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things, and that even leads, at least in my life, leads to even like more weight on that negative spiral, because then you're like, oh, why did I do that? They didn't deserve it. And then you harden yourself again. And then it happens again. And
yes,
it just like keeps on like giving, keeps on going. So since we're actually on this subject, what are some of those good ways like you like to either yourself or for your clients to alleviate that pressure? You could give like a few more examples of what you like to do in practice or theory or whatever. A lot of words, I don't, probably not the right one.
No, you're fine. No matter what you've done, first of all, we have to give ourselves grace. I think, you kind of touched on that, that you feel bad about it, or give yourself grace. All of us have done things we're not proud of. All of us have made decisions that later on we've regretted. But we have to remember that who we are in that moment was doing the best they could with what they were coping with or what they knew. And I've done a lot of self-forgiveness work and self-compassion work, and depending on your reaction. So our nervous system will react in different ways. Some people completely shut down. In my training, we call it the red light. Call it the traffic lights of tolerance. Red light is when you are in complete shutdown. That's often where you'll see people with they'll freeze. They become depressed. They have low energy. They literally get the deer in their headlights in the moment. You'll see it. Like physically, you'll see their body shut down. That's the hardest place to be, but it still can be fixed. This is the baby step stage. Often anything we try to do can be overwhelming. Even just taking a couple of breaths, just stopping for a moment and just start with that. If you are exhausted and you can't get out of the bed, if you can find just even the energy to get up and get dressed, then I want you to congratulate every little thing you do. It may seem small and insignificant, but they will eventually build. And each win, no matter how small, is going to move you to the next stage, which is what we call the yellow light. And this is some people, I stay in this light a lot and I have to watch it. It's the anxiety, it's the fight or flight. It's when our heart is racing. It's what was programmed into us biologically when we're being chased or in danger. But like in my hypervigilance as a child, I was in that state all the time. In those stages, you are a little bit more able to adjust. Maybe you can go take a walk. Maybe you can call a friend and say, I really need to talk. Exercise is a great thing too. I exercise a lot because I am dealing, first of all, I have a lot of energy and I enjoy food. But there's also I have a lot of anxiety issues still. And that physical activity actually helps to move it out of my body.
I remember once I was annoyed at my girlfriend at the time and I went to exercise. And the only problem was I was going to see her afterwards, so I psyched myself up too
Yep.
much, and I was still very, very, very angry afterwards.
Oh
I overdid it a little bit, maybe a little bit of overdoing it, because
no. A little bit overdoing. Yeah. Yeah.
wouldn't recommend that one specifically.
No.
At least
No, or no.
with not too much, in moderation, like a lot of things. You can overdo that one, at least.
You can. You can. My daughter and I got into an argument once when she was a teenager on the racquetball court, and it turned into this. We're both very strong-willed, but and we started this game of trying to hit each other with the racquetball because we were angry.
Yeah, it almost becomes a little dangerous. Like, whoa,
yeah, right.
Like, oh, now I'm gonna show you, and it just keeps escalating.
Yes, exactly.
Well, who decided to be the adult and to stop it? Actually,
I don't remember, but it probably wasn't me.
Yeah, sometimes people. I imagine kids can get on your nerves just as much as parents can get on your nerves.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I will imagine it gets both ways. Often I look at my mom and like, Dan, like, how did you bear with this? Like, I was annoying, very, very, very annoying kid. And say, no, there's nothing. You were nice. I'm like, yeah. That sounds like another lie. But going into actually building up that like self-confidence. I for example, I have like a book. I don't use it that much anymore, but basically I used to use it to write like 3 things every day that I'm proud of, because you can easily write 3 things. If you can't find 3, just aim a little bit smaller and then build yourself up from there. And is there a way you found, besides just like building those small wins, if a person is really, really, really in the hole and nothing can work? Like, how do you take that first initial step so you actually can write one thing down in the book?
Yeah. For some people, it takes seeing a coach or a therapist that they are so deep in the weeds of not being able to see that. And it's okay to admit that you are. Maybe that's just the first step, is saying, you know what, I can't think of anything. I don't have anything today, and accepting that. Don't marinate in it, but maybe reach out and talk to a therapist and find out, why is that? Why is it that I don't? Because we do go through times like that. If you are able to, I personally just say, focus on doing things. We talked about Mayor of Joy. Particularly as women, we often give a lot of ourselves away. We're mothers, we're wives, we're girlfriends, we're employees. And society has really asked a lot of us, and sometimes too much, that we give our own personality away a chip at a time. For women, I often invite them to find something they enjoy, whether it's new or it's something they've forgotten about or they've gotten away from. Gardening and enjoying dinners. I love food, so I try to go out once a week and try a new restaurant. I love coffee shops. Maybe it's just taking a walk and going on a new trail, but figuring out what is it I like to do. And I understand a lot of women, particularly if their mothers, aren't going to have a lot of time. So even if you just take 5 minutes a day, 30 minutes a week, carve it out for yourself. If you got to lock yourself in the bathroom to read your favorite book, do it. I've done it, But I think when we start to invest in ourselves and date ourselves, and it's something I've decided to do even if I'm in a relationship, date yourself. If you were in a new relationship, you want to get to know that person and what they like. Pretend that you are in a new relationship with yourself.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
But I think it's not a good analogy. You're full with him. But on the subject of women, actually, how would you say, in your experience, your eyes, the approach for men and women is different when it comes to personal development? Because there are some differences, like you alluded to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really different. It's interesting because I just interviewed a guest on my podcast this morning who deals primarily with men. I do think, just from a biological standpoint, that men, they are less in touch with their feelings. There's more women interested in personal development. I think it's just a natural thing. It's not right or wrong by any means. And I think that men do shy away. And that there's reasons for that too. I mean, we're different. We're wired that way. And that comes from, whether it's cavemen or whatever it is. But I do think men are capable of becoming self-aware when it comes to personal development. And I do think it's becoming more important in our society. For me, I'm dating very differently now. And I'm looking for a man that's emotionally available because I've become emotionally available. And not everyone's going to, be that, but I think it's advantageous for men to at least try to be, because it widens their dating pool for a healthier relationship.
Yeah, well, it's always good to be in touch with your emotions.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to bury him and become a Coke bottle and let it go on everybody at some point. It might take a while because you're resilient in the handle that don't really bother you too much, but just having that conversation with yourself every once in a while,
right.
Date yourself, to use other words, is a great place to start. I think one of the best things for me is just think about how your day went when you go to bed, when you lay in the bed anyway.
Yeah.
Most of us don't fall asleep like this. And,
right.
well, if you do, you're probably pretty well with your emotional and your personal development most of
right.
the things, I imagine, because you're not worrying too much about anything. You're living a great life. I don't know how you found this episode, but please do let me know down below. Like, it really annoys me and pisses me off when everybody tries to put women and men in the same box. For sure, there's a lot of things we both can do, but the approach is different. We're kind of playing on the same field, but we're not quite playing the same game.
Right. And another difference that popped in my mind is a woman, if she's feeling something, she's going to go tell her friends. Men aren't. And I don't expect that that's going to change, because that's just not how it works in the male structure. And that's okay. You can talk to your partner or maybe a coach about that. But that, I think, is a big difference too, is we're much more open and public about it. I would guess, I'm not a man, so I don't know, but my observation is that if you are in touch with your emotions, you're going to keep it a little bit more closer to you. I mean, unless you're Jay Shetty or, Matthew Hesse, that you're making a living out of it,
Well, yeah, they're very open, and there's definitely a lot to learn from both of those individuals. I'm only really familiar with Jay. I don't know the other guy too much. I haven't seen too much of his stuff. Maybe I should go check him out, actually. Right. There's always something you can learn from everybody. Everybody can teach you something. There's nobody that's completely incapable of teaching you something.
Right.
Even if it's a guy living on the savannah in Africa, probably teach you a lot more than you actually think, because there's a big culture difference. And but looking at us in the West, like weaklings, all of you, you have nothing to worry about. And that's actually one thing I would like to remind myself of, is when I'm having a bad day, things could be worse. Everybody could be starving in my entire town, and none of us had food because we weren't able to catch anything, or there wasn't no rain. It came a month late. Like that sucks. Like I can just, if I'm hungry, I'll drive to the restaurant and go to the shops.
Yeah,
and then it's solved. Like I have all the basic things. Like we're almost like, what's the word for it? One of those translation things when you have the thing in your head in a different language.
Like pampered, spoiled?
Yeah, spoiled in that way, but like luxury problems.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've seen documentaries of people in other countries that are way poorer than us, but they're happier. So
look like
there's something to be said,
life.
Right?
And that's probably one of the best things we could learn from them, is the kind of that more carefree lifestyle, not putting so much feelings into what goes on this thing and the computer and all of that stuff.
Right.
A person says something about you on the internet, who cares? They don't even know you. Like, their opinion is completely irrelevant, because they have absolutely no clue of what they're speaking about, actually. But for the person that's really enjoyed, or actually, let me say, for the woman that's really enjoyed our conversation today, what would be a good place for them to go check you out, learn more about what you do, to start loving themselves more?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place for them to go is my website. That's highvaluewoman.info. I would love for them just to join my newsletter, just to keep up with what's going on. I have, like I said, I have a podcast myself, and I blog, and I do speaking engagements and all kinds of fun stuff. But sign up for the newsletter, and that way you'll have all the know before everybody else does.
I'll make sure to put that link down below in the description, show notes, whatever they call it, on the specific platform you're listening and viewing to this on.
Yes.
And also, a question I always like to ask our guests after a good conversation is, what is one thing you would like for the audience to take away to kind of sum this whole episode up?
It goes back to that self-compassion. So healing is a journey. It's not a destination, and there will be setbacks, and there will be days where you do it wrong and you're not feeling good. And I just want to say, don't worry about that. Tomorrow is day one. You can start over. No matter how many times you think you've quote unquote failed, it's not a failure. You're learning, because when you get back up, you have knowledge you didn't have the last time you got knocked down.
And then you're not going to do it again. It's only a failure if you keep
Hopefully
doing
not.
the same thing over and over and over again.
Right? And don't learn anything. Right.
Then we can talk about failure. That's actually one of the things I'm fortunate I got taught at a young age by a course I joined is you only fail if you decide to learn something. So you really have three options when you do something. You succeed, you learn, or you fail. And failure only happens if you decide not to do the other two. First one, success. Sometimes it's out of your hands, sometimes it isn't. Partly not. But if you decide to learn something enough, that's completely up into the individual. It's a beautiful message to end the podcast off with. And just appreciate you very much, Laura, for coming on the Business Library, having a conversation about your life and a lot of the lessons you learned, just giving our audience, viewers, a lot of value.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here today.